Hi everyone, Dave Mighty Mouse West here. Today I'm going to show you how to set forms and get ready to pour some concrete. And then tomorrow I'm going to come back, weather permitting, and pour the concrete back. So that'll be a second episode. So a little bit about me. I've been in the business of concrete for at least 30 years, probably longer. Mostly custom stuff like this, patios, house foundations, stuff like that. I'm not too familiar with structural stuff, big high rises and all that kind of stuff. But stuff like this is pretty simple. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go over some of the do's and don'ts and just get you familiar with this. Maybe you could do something like this yourself. I mean, it's always good to have some professionals around. But anyhow, so let's get started. So when it comes to setting forms, just think of it as you're constructing a custom cake pan, if you will, and you're going to fill it with batter. You can do any shapes. You could do curves. You can do round. You can do square. It's really up to you and what the limitations are within your backyard. If you're able to do that. In this instance right here, we're locked in with the driveway to my left and the neighbor's grass and property line to my right. So pretty much we have to have a straight line. Well, let's look at some of the do's and don'ts. Well, as you can see, we don't have a straight line. That's because they didn't use a string line. I'll show you how to do that in just a second. But just keep in mind that if a line is supposed to be straight, it's supposed to be straight. If we would like to have some curves to it or something, no problem. Instead of using a 2x4 or 1x, you can get some redwood bender board, or they make some plastic materials you can find at your home improvement centers. But to get the shape you're looking for, simply just take a garden hose or a piece of rope and just lay it out however you like it and just make your adjustments. When you're happy with it, you can even take some marker paint that you can get in a can, sprays upside down. You can mark it out, trim the grass back if need be, or again, just set it right to the rope and there you go. So first things first, the stakes are on the wrong side. If you were to go and try and pull this out, you'd have a tough time because we put the stakes on the outside so we could pull the nails or screws, remove the stakes, and then remove the forms. I mean, if you're planning on leaving the form in place for whatever reason, then it doesn't really matter. And these guys right here, just utilities, cable, phone lines, stuff like that. Don't really want to get too involved with it, so we're just going to kind of float in around it and just kind of make it work. But I'll show you that on the pour. Okay, so we already have a form board in place that's been installed incorrectly. We're going to put it back at the same elevation. As we can see, the grass kind of rolls up. If we chose to, we could, we're going to run a string line, but just so we can keep it straight. But this has a natural roll to it. If we try and make it a straight line, it's going to cause a lot more work. We're going to have to dig a lot more dirt out, and then it's going to expose the soil below that grass. Does it really matter? It's just a matter of opinion. No one's ever going to say anything because this has a slight hump to it or roll to it. A lot of times it's an easier way to go. Be careful and try and not overthink stuff like this. It's easy to do. Aside from form lumber, we'll need stakes, some form string, a small hammer to hammer the nails, a large hammer or sledgehammer to drive the stakes, and some nails. The duplex nail, a very cool nail. The bottom half sucks up against the wood, just sinks it tight. The top half is so that you could pull it out with a hammer. The duplex nail comes in most sizes and works quite well. Okay, so to get started setting our string, in this instance, we have options. We can either drive a stake, tie the string around that, or use the handy duplex nail. Just poke it right into the side here at the height we like, tie a string off to it, and we're good to go. I'm going for the duplex nail. So again, we're not really worried about height because there's a roll in the grass. So the string line's going to start here. On the other end, it's going to be elevated above it. It's just to be able to look down and sight it. And I'm just going to demonstrate that. Typically what I would do is maybe not even set a string for something like this and just kind of look at it and just push the form in with my foot. But just so you can understand how to set a string line, we'll go that way. So here's a cool trick on tying off a string to a nail or a stake. So we have our string. We just take the loose end, flip it over, just making a basic loop. Forefinger and thumb. It's just a simple little loop. You have to pull on both strings though. If you only pull on this string, it'll pull through. Okay, so we have our string line up. We have the grass cut back. We're pretty much good to go. So the next step we need to complete is the crowning of the wood. And not with a crown. We have to, the crown is the hump. So that's real simple. Just sight down it. This kind of bows like that. So the crown is now going up. It rolls that way. The reason why we do that is we can help push the board down. In this case, we don't need to. It's working to our advantage because we have a slight roll to this, so we're okay here. But if we were trying to make a straight level form, then what we could do is put a stake on an angle, on a pretty heavy angle, step on the board, pushing the board down to make it flat to the string line, okay, and then put 2 nails in the stake so it can't spring back up, and that would help keep the board straight. Again, here we're rolling. We don't have to worry about water puddling or anything like that. We have a tremendous amount of slope or fall that's going to get rid of all the water for us. But we still crown the boards. And so I'll crown them all. I'll lay them out in a straight line. And what I do is I put the crown away from me. So I always grab the board and pick it up, put it in place. The same way every time. I get it right every time. All right, let's get started. For 2x4s, I space the stakes 3 to 4 feet apart. Keep in mind, the thinner the wood, the more stakes you need. Well, time for glasses. Wouldn't want to hit my thumb with a hammer. Okay, so our string line is up, our boards are crowned, our stakes are laid out, we're ready to go. Now again, this is just for a straight line. We're not using this to set an elevation or a height, if you will. So, I'm simply just going to sight down, see where that goes right there. Take my foot and kind of sandwich the stake and the 2x4 looking down the string line. So I have my duplex nail. My sledgehammer I'm going to use as a backer. I'm going to use the weight or inertia of this hammer to keep from banging everything loose. I'll give a couple more taps. So I raise the form up a little above where I know it needs to go. So I have my concrete right here, so obviously I need to go to the concrete. I'm going to raise it up a little bit. Because I still rattled it loose a little bit. And then now I can bring it down to the height I need. Then what I'll do is I'll go to the other end of the 2x4, put a stake there, and then if there's a slight bow, I put the bow out away. I can just push in with a stake. Okay, so now it's time to join 2 boards together. So for that, we're simply going to toenail. A toenail is just simply nailing on an angle. Okay, so now that we straightened out the string line and actually put it on the property line, this form board's a little bit too long, and we're a little bit more involved with this this little box thing right here. So no big deal. We'll just go ahead and mark this here, here. Just eyeball it. No big deal. We'll make those cuts, get a couple more stakes, and finish set forms, and then we'll be off for grading. So we ran our string line, we crowned our lumber, we laid out our stakes, we went ahead and set our form. It's not perfect. I mean, this lumber's old. It's been here for, I don't know, a few years, so it's kind of warped and everything. But the homeowner elected not to purchase new wood. It's a lot straighter than what it was. Nobody will ever see the little tiny things. Save a few bucks. I mean, 2x4s, $4 a piece out here in California. So there you go. That's how to set forms. Now let's press on to grading. Okay, so we're ready to start grading. For that, we'll need some tools. So we have the basics: shovel. This is a flat shovel. This is what we use in concrete, and when we go to grade things, it's stuff like that. Because the edge is flat. This is a spade shovel. This is good for digging holes because it's pointed, and this one's not. So this one's a little bit harder to dig holes unless you're digging footings for, like, say, a foundation or a block wall. Then again, you're going to want the flat shovel. For post holes or something like that, barbecue pit or something, the spade shovel. So this is not much, this is not any good use for us today. So we'll just put that to the side. So we have our flat shovel. This, I don't know what you call it, but it comes in handy sometimes just to kind of scratch up a little bit of dirt. The rake can do the same thing sometimes. It really depends on the soil. The soil here is dry. I elected not to put any water on it because I think it's going to come up pretty easy. And when you wet it, it makes it heavier. And there's quite a few wheelbarrows to take out of here. We have our mattock, which is just basically a pick on one side and a huge just axe type cutter on the other. We can use that to scrape some of the dirt away. And then our rod board. So we're going to need a board, 2x4, that's straight. And I got this at the home improvement store. I crowned it. Let's see if it's still straight. It's still looking good. Awesome. And just so you know, the fewer the knots in a board, the less likely it is to warp. But it's getting harder and harder to find good wood these days. Anyway, and then we have our wheelbarrow. And so the first thing I'll do is I will cut this 2x4. We call it a rod board or a screet board out here in California. And I'm going to cut that to fit just inside. And the object is going to be to have the top of the 2x4 touch the top of the form on this side, and the top of the 2x4 to touch the top of the concrete on this side. And that'll give us 3.5 inches all the way through, and that's all we need for this driveway addition. Here we have a situation. I'm using this stick to illustrate the two uneven surfaces, which is a trip hazard. This piece either sank or this piece rose up. This is due to the bad soil at this location. The fix? We'll use this roto hammer with a masonry bit. We'll drill holes in all of the existing concrete and add these dowels. We'll go all the way around the driveway, and this should help alleviate the problem. Step number 1, ear protection. Always. When drilling, always aim for the center. Try and stay away from the top. You may have issues with that later. I drilled these holes on angles opposite each other. This is to help keep the dowels from pulling out. You could drill the hole straight, but then you would need to epoxy them. But keep in mind, the holes must be spotless inside. Now that the holes are drilled, it's time to hammer in the dowels, but only to the homeowner's concrete, never the city sidewalk, as it's taboo. Sometimes the holes get drilled on a slight angle, and this would have the bars sticking up through the new concrete, so we simply step them down. But again, if we drill the holes too high up, it might crack the top. Well, alrighty then. All we have to do now is soak it down really good to help compact it for tomorrow. Thanks for watching. If you like this video or learned something new, please leave us a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe for more videos to come.